The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasy. Onyx is giving away $15 million, WrestleMania 5. It's on the promo code SGPN. It's going to be your first time positive offer of $2 bonus cash on Onyx Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Rhythm has the best AI picks and projections, and the football models are about to go live. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampodcast.com, rhythmsportscampodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Wednesday night, roughly 7 p.m. Eastern Time on July 31st. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun one because it is time to get into the quarterfinals of the Olympics. So we're going to preview the 4 matches on the men's side taking place on Thursday. Before getting to that, though, want to remind you once again that we have a lot of different ways you can support us. One way is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Another way is to rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So point doesn't matter how you actually watch the podcast, you can still show some feedback and some support. So I recommend you doing either one. I know subscribers are over 400. Hopefully get to 500 over the next couple weeks. And if you are still listening to it on Spotify or Apple, that's fine too. Just don't forget to leave us some form of review so we know you're out there. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. We have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs. All high quality, all cheap, so definitely very affordable. And recommend you getting yourself something from the merch store, not just for the tennis show, but also for other shows from the network. And the featured show for the week is going to be the Sports Gambling Podcast, which just launched their 32 NFL team previews. And as a bonus, each team preview episode has a code word in it, and submit the 32 code word phrase, and you could be the lucky winner who gets a $500 NFL Circa Future Bet. Subscribe for you to get your podcast, and also a reminder, download the SGPN app. Time to get into the actual recap, though, of what happened in the third round. Moving on, before I actually get into that, want to just briefly say that there was a serious rain delay in Washington, so I'm not sure when they're actually going to finish the matches for today. So we were going to do a quarterfinal episode for, of course, Washington for tomorrow, but now I'm not sure if we're going to because it depends on when the lines get posted, depends on when the Rublev and the Opelka matches end. So we'll see how late the matches actually go tonight, but something to keep in mind. If we end up not doing a Washington episode, it's because the lines weren't out on time, and the point is the rain delay did not do us any favors. Anyway, starting off with the recap for the lock and dog picks of the third round. For the lock, not great. Ended up losing with Cerundolo plus 3.5 at minus 120 as he lost in straight sets to Rude. A second straight episode, we lost one of our picks with a guy who did not break in the entire match. He had some chances. I believe Rude went 3 for 3 when it comes to actually defending his break points. And either way, point is Cerundolo was close on a couple of service games to getting over the finish line, but just could not do it. And if he got the break to start the second set, that would have been nice, but unfortunately did leave a couple of chances before losing in straight sets. So it didn't exactly work out there. Point is, though, ended up picking up a loss in the lock section. For the dog, though, nice winner, as we had Musetti, a minus 1.5 games at even money against Fritz. Got off to a slow start as he went down 3-0. And then Musetti dominated as he ended up winning, I believe it was 6 of the last 7 games in the first set. Point is, though, Fritz just can't beat this guy. Musetti's now 3-0 this season against Fritz, and he's 2-0 on clay without dropping a set. So far this year, Fritz I didn't think was that bad, but Musetti got broken immediately in the first service game, and then Fritz did not break for the rest of the match. So Musetti kind of settled in relatively quickly. Something that I have noticed, though, with Musetti's matches, sometimes he gets off to some slow starts out of the gates, and then he kind of eases his way back into it. Exactly what happened in the match on Wednesday, as he was able to come back from a deficit in the first set. Then he kind of dominated from that point forward. Did not get broken once again for the remainder of the match. But nice winner there for the dogs. Basically broke even, hit an even money play for a dog, lost the lock. So once again, basically broke even, and we'll look for a sweep here on the quarterfinal episode for the Wednesday matches. Now, before we get into any of the actual preview of the matches, do want to briefly recap what happened in the actual matches on Wednesday. For starters, really no drama at all. Unfortunately for us, we did have 8 matches, and all 8 of them ended in straight sets, which kind of sucks. We were hoping for some drama, didn't get any, and you ended up seeing a pretty straightforward day of tennis. We got most of the angles right, though. Did lose the Cerundolo match. Did lean to Medvedev, but we did think Felix had a shot to win it. Like the over, though, that didn't get there, as Felix won in straight sets. And we also thought Zverev would win with the under. That didn't get there, as that match ended up landing 21 when the over-under was at 20.5. So the last 3 matches of the day weren't that great, but we did well in the first 5 matches. We had Tsitsipas in straight sets. Djokovic we actually skipped. Just didn't cover it. Probably weren't missing much as he was a minus 3,000 favorite. Paul, we thought would win but not cover against Moutet, as he was laying about 5.5. Very disrespectful line. First set was a breaker, and then Paul broke in the second set to get the win. Point is, though, Moutet covered, really never in doubt there. So a nice win for the plus 5.5. For Musetti, we called that one as that was our dog, minus 1.5 games, as Fritz can't beat him. And then for the Sfoulin match, we did only the Sfoulin plus the 6 or 6.5. Hopefully he got the hook, as he ended up losing by exactly 6. So once again, overall, decent day for us on Wednesday. Hopefully we have a better day on Thursday, but really not much to recap because everything was pretty straightforward. You ended up seeing Tsitsipas look great for the majority of that match. Djokovic looked fine, bit vulnerable against Koepfer early, then he kind of dominated the second set. Paul does the exact match I thought we were going to get, and that's exactly what happened. Musetti once again continues to win against everybody except for the final set against Cerundolo in Umag, but he continues his great run. I believe he's now 15-3 in his last 18 matches. Sfoulin looked fine early, then Alcaraz settled in. Do want to point out, though, Alcaraz now has more stamina in the future, potentially, because the doubles reign ended, as he ended up losing with Nadal to the American team with Ram. So point is, instead of having to worry about Alcaraz dividing up energy between doubles and singles, there's no longer an issue, as Nadal and Alcaraz were eliminated from the competition on Wednesday. Besides that, trying to think if there's anything else worth talking about. Props to Felix for finally beating Medvedev. He's now 1-7. Good for him. Going through the other actual matches here, we'll start off with what happened in the women's event briefly, just because I do think it's important to talk about. I know that we ended up seeing the Americans not do too well recently, as we saw Goff lose, Pegula lost already, and we saw Collins get injured, and she lost in the third set via retirement to Swiatek. Kerber's career officially ended, as she ended up losing to Zhang in a third set tiebreak. So shout out to Kerber, who had a very solid career. And unfortunately, her final run came to an end as Zhang outlasted her in the final set breaker. Krajikova ended up losing, as Shmidlova has been really good so far in the event. And you saw Vekic get the job done in a final set breaker against Kostyuk. So Vekic is playing well after making the Wimbledon run that she did, and we'll see if she can potentially finish the job off in this event. Of course, you have Swiatek here. She's the massive favorite. What else is new? So we'll see if anyone can dethrone her. Anyway, before we get into the actual matches for the quarterfinals on Thursday, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because there's one Underdog Streaks, which means if you hit your first 2 pick'em entries, you can go streaking. If you get an 11-0 run, you can win 1,000 times your money, plus WrestleMania is live with $15 million in prizes. You can add your specials and boost on all flex entries. I'll probably use my next entry with Giannis higher points in his upcoming game against Australia in Olympic basketball. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your first-time deposit offer and a special pick. The first-time deposit offer, as far as bonus cash on Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by OddsJam. OddsJam is your one-stop shop for beating sportsbooks. OddsJam uses millions of data points across every U.S. and Canadian sportsbook, show you the best value plays for your money. Their line shopping tool allows you to see the best price for any bet that you want to make across countless sportsbooks, not just DraftKings and FanDuel, though, but also BetOnline, Bovada, Cut, and many more. They have an arbitrage tool, which allows you to find the best place to bet both sides of the same prop, so you can guarantee yourself a positive ROI. They also have a nice fantasy tool, which allows you to see the highest EV plays relative to the sportsbook's odds, allowing you to crush sites like Underdog Fantasy. They also have a tool for finding the best sign-up bonuses. If you're interested in trying out OddsJam, you can get a 7-day free trial by using the link below. And don't forget to enter the promo code SGPN to get 35% off your first month of subscription. OddsJam.com, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the round of 16 action in the Olympics on Wednesday. Now it's time to get into the preview for the Olympic quarterfinals for Thursday. Starting off with the first match on the card, you have what should be an interesting one. Going through the actual order for the matches here. First match on the slate, I'm going to tell you right now, some books have not posted lines on all these matches yet. So keep it in mind. But you have Paul against Alcaraz in a rematch of the Wimbledon matchup that we saw a couple of weeks ago. Alcaraz, though, is a massive favorite, minus 600. Paul is plus 460. For the spread, minus 4.5 for Alcaraz, plus 4.5 for Paul. Plus money, though, for Paul at plus 105. The over-under in games at 20.5. For set wagering, Alcaraz in straight sets is minus 165. Paul to win a set is plus 135. The over 2.5 sets is plus 175. Now, Alcaraz has looked very comfortable so far in the event, and you're looking at Paul, who's been comfortable too. But the point is, Alcaraz, we do know, is the much better clay player. They've had a bunch of marathon meetings. They faced off 5 times, and only one of those 5 have ended in straight sets. However, I am going to point out that none of those meetings were on clay. So even though they have been competitive in the head-to-head, I do think clay will definitely benefit Alcaraz more than Paul. So if you're going to get a lopsided event between them, or lopsided matchup in the upcoming quarterfinal match, then I think clay is the most likely actual surface for a pretty easy Alcaraz win. We know in grass, Paul is fine. And we saw Alcaraz beat him in 4 in Wimbledon. On hard court, they've had 3 separate wars and 1 straight set win for Alcaraz back last year in Miami. Point is, though, the hard courts are competitive. The grass seems to be competitive. Clay, we're not totally sure. But Alcaraz, I think conceptually, would be the much better clay player because, of course, he is the better returner. He is just the overall better player, and I do think that Paul would struggle in the longer rallies against Alcaraz on a regular basis. Now, Paul, I do think, can make it interesting for a little while, and he has been good in the event, as you ended up beating Mutet, ended up beating Mensik, and he beat Darderi in his 3 matches here. However, I do think that Alcaraz, who's also been comfortable not dropping a set in this event either, I think that he is just the better player, and I think that a straight sets win for Alcaraz is a pretty straightforward prediction that I think has a pretty good chance of getting there. Paul can maybe force a breaker, maybe a 7-5, but going against the French Open champion, I just can't do. I think that Paul's going to struggle in this matchup, and I feel like a lot of people are going to blindly back the head-to-head history, which supports Paul, keeping the match competitive. The issue is with clay, I don't want to compare it exactly to the Medvedev and Felix match we just saw on Wednesday, where one guy owned the head-to-head, and you blindly back the script, and Medvedev ends up losing, which is kind of what happened with us. But we thought Felix was going to be given more than a puncher's chance of winning. We just thought that he wouldn't get the job done entirely. Point is, kind of similar story here. I feel like surface matters a lot, and I do think that because of the unique surface in this event, at least compared to the head-to-head meetings, it's tough to really use the, I'd say, previous meetings to draw any conclusions. And I think Alcaraz, just being the better clay player, is the angle I'll use. I think 165 is pretty affordable. I don't mind the minus 4.5 games maybe for Alcaraz. I do think that Paul can lose a set handily, like 6-2. That wouldn't shock me. And if that happens, that does open up and really just a lot of possibilities for Alcaraz to cover anyway. So I do think for the sake of this matchup, I am going to lean to the games and I am going to lean to the sets. But I think that Alcaraz is the better player, and I think that's going to be the case on Thursday. So give me Alcaraz in straight sets and with the games minus the 4.5. Moving on to the next game on the slate, you have Zverev taking on Musetti. For this one, Zverev's a favorite of about minus 220. You see Musetti at about plus 190. For the game spread, you have minus 3.5. You have minus 3.5 for Zverev at even money. You have plus 3.5 for Musetti at minus 120. The over/under for games is 22.5. Point is, though, for this matchup, we have seen, of course, Musetti be in great form, as he has won 15 of his last 18 matches. Zverev, though, has been fine in the event. He's not dropped a set yet, but he's had a couple of competitive sets in his last couple of matches. He went to a 7-5 against Papiron. He was down a break in that one in the first set. He ended up going to a 7-5 in the second set against Makic. So he's been fine, not overly dominant. Killed Munar, though, in the first round. Looking at Musetti, we know he's been great. Beat Monfils in straight sets, beat Navoni in straight sets, and beat Fritz in straight sets. So I do think Musetti's faced off against better competition in this event, and he has looked a bit sharper. And of course, he looked really good at Wimbledon and in Umag right before this. So I do think that you're looking at Musetti, who's in great form. Yes, I know I gave out the I'd say future bets on Zverev to win the quarter and to win the event. But I do think you're looking at a spot where Zverev, I think, is vulnerable here. I think that Musetti can potentially get the job done outright, and I do think that based on his current form, it's really tough to not expect Musetti to go out swinging if he's going to lose in this matchup, because Musetti has been hanging in there with everybody, and Cerundolo had to play the best tennis of his career, basically, to beat him, and even that match was up in the air. So Musetti's been passing every test. I do think that he's in line for a very solid performance here. Zverev has been vulnerable against weaker competition. Musetti might pull this off. I don't mind the over, though, but I think you're going to see a close matchup. Zverev did win the first head-to-head meeting, but it was back in 2022, and Musetti got injured, actually. Did retire down 3-6-0-1, so I don't know if I could actually use that since it was 2 years ago, and there was some injury news to it, but I think Musetti's in too good of a form to actually avoid taking at this price, and I think that 2-1, give or take, is a pretty solid number for a guy playing the best tennis of his career. So Zverev might win. Don't get me wrong. Wouldn't shock me here. But I think that minus 220 is a bit steep. I actually do. I think Musetti right now should be, if I had to put a price on it, plus 150, plus 160. I think Zverev should be favored, but Musetti being in this good of a form, I think 190 is disrespectful, so I am going to go with Musetti in this one for the value. I'll lean to the games, and I will lean to the over as well. Moving on to the next match on the card. You have Rude taking on Felix. For this one, you have Rude as a minus 190 favorite, give or take. You have Felix at around plus 150. And for the actual head-to-head, you have Rude being up 4-3. However, faced off one time this year on clay was in Madrid, and Felix did beat Rude in straight sets. It was competitive, 6-4, 7-5. Point is, though, Felix did win the last meeting on clay, and it was this year, so maybe he's alive to get the job done in this one. Rude we faded in the round of 16. We took Cerundolo based on current form, and Rude, I thought, objectively looked solid. He had some vulnerable moments, but he did a good job not getting broken, and Felix did look good against Medvedev, finally exercising the demons and beating him for the first time. Now, Rude, despite losing that first match, the last matchup, to Felix, was in good form, as he had won 3 of the last 4 meetings, and that actually is the only clay meeting that Felix ever won against Rude. Rude ended up beating him in Lyon. Ended up losing to Felix in Lyon, actually, in 2017. So apologies there. That was actually the second time Felix beat him on clay. Faced off, though, in a challenger event in Italy the year after. Rude won in straight sets, and they faced off in Madrid in 2021, and Rude did win that one in straight sets. So the point is, it's been kind of back and forth between them, but Rude has won 3 of the last 4 meetings. Felix, though, has been in great form, as he has not dropped a set in the event, so I do have to at least acknowledge it. He's also still in doubles, so keep an eye out for that, potential fatigue issues. Point is, though, beat Medvedev, beat Martero only dropping 1 game, and beat Giron only dropping 5 games. Rude, though, besides the competitive match against Vavasori, has looked fine for the most part. I'd lean to Rude, but I think I'd lean to Rude in 3. I think Felix can win a set here. I think he can make it competitive. Would I pick Felix to win? Probably not. I think you could argue the money line's actually fair. Maybe a bit expensive, but I do think that Rude has proven time and time again that he's the better clay player, making the French Open final, a couple of times, and also being able to make the semis on numerous occasions. He has a bit more of a track record on these courts, and I do think Felix can look sharp, but I do think that Rude will look sharper. So I think I am going to lean to Rude, but I do prefer the over if I had to pick an actual bet in this matchup. I think it's going to be closer than people think. Maybe it goes 3, but I would lean to Rude to win. Give me the over, though, as my favorite play for the value. Moving on to the last match on the card, you have arguably the best matchup. You have Djokovic against Tsitsipas, which has been a pretty consistent matchup, I'd say, on clay for the last couple of years, where you have seen Djokovic usually win, but the matches are usually competitive, as Djokovic is currently 11-3 lifetime against Tsitsipas. I'm going to go through the last couple of meetings for reference here. You're looking at Djokovic winning 5 straight matchups on clay, but if you want to actually go through those for a second, Djokovic ended up beating him in Rome in 2022. So the last clay meeting was about 2 years ago. Djokovic did win that one 6-0, 7-6. They had the French Open final in 2021, where Tsitsipas won the first 2 sets, then lost the next 3. They faced off in Rome in 2021. Djokovic won in 3 with 2 7-5s at the end of it. Faced off in the French Open 2020. Djokovic did win that one in 5. Faced off in the Madrid Open in 2019. Djokovic did win that one in straight sets. Point is, though, 3 of the last 4 meetings on clay between them have gone distance. So we'll see, and 2 of them were Grand Slam distance. So we'll see if the matchup's competitive or not, and we'll see if Djokovic is a worthy favorite to this degree in this matchup. Now, unlike Alcaraz, he's not that big of a favorite, but he's minus 300, and Tsitsipas is plus 250. For the actual game spread, minus 3.5 for Djokovic, plus 3.5 for Tsitsipas. The over-under for games is set at 22.5. For set wagering, Tsitsipas to win a set is minus 130. Djokovic in straight sets, it is even money, and the over 2.5 sets is plus 145. So for the actual matchup here, I think Djokovic has been fine in the event, but it's been kind of a theme recently for Djokovic. He's been winning a lot of matches, but his path has been an absolute joke. We saw it in Wimbledon, where he faced off against basically nobody, where his best opponent was arguably Rune, and then he ended up facing off against Musetti in the semis. No offense to Musetti, we know he's in great form. Point is, though, facing off against him in a Grand Slam semi is an absolute joke that's not on clay. So he had a pretty favorable draw there. Then Djokovic ended up having a favorable draw here because he played against Ebden in the first round, who was a last-second fill-in, who had not played a singles match on the ATP level in about 5 years. Djokovic beat him 6-0, 6-1. Then he beat Nadal's corpse in the second round, where Nadal had a 2.5-hour match the day prior. So Nadal was exhausted, and Djokovic kind of buried him like he should. And then for the last matchup, he faced off against Kempfer in the third round, which is kind of shocking, and he won that one in straight sets. Was 7-5 in there, though, so one set was competitive. The point is that Djokovic has really not played anybody worth a damn so far in the event. I know Nadal, based on nostalgia, is worth a damn, but not in 2024. So I do think that Djokovic has had a pretty easy path so far. Tsitsipas, not as much, ended up beating Baez, who we know is a very solid clay player, won a 500 earlier this year. Evans is not very good at this stage in his career, and Bergs is not really great. Decent clay player, but Tsitsipas, ever since dropping that second set, 6-1, has been solid. And I do think that Tsitsipas is dangerous in this matchup. Now, I'm picking Tsitsipas to win. No. Simply put, Djokovic beats him every time. Djokovic has won 9 straight against Tsitsipas. But I do think he can make it at least one set competitive. And I do think that Djokovic, even if he does win in straight sets, I don't see an absolute, I'd say, one-sided affair. I think Djokovic might win this one with a breaker attached to it, maybe like a 7-6, 6-3. Something pretty standard, something that you'd see the scoreline for and go, yeah, that sounds about right. But it does involve Tsitsipas not getting embarrassed for at least 40 minutes to an hour in this matchup. I see that happening. Maybe he wins a set, but it's tough to actually pick him to win as an upset when he's lost 9 straight against Djokovic. So that being the case, I think I am going to go with the favorite here, but I do think that this matchup will actually be closer, at least for one set, than you might expect. So I think I am going to go with the team total over for Djokovic at 12.5. I think that he's in line for, once again, at least one competitive set. Tsitsipas has been solid. He's been in good form. And he destroyed Baez, who's still a very solid clay player, on Wednesday. I like his overall form right now. But Djokovic is Djokovic, and I do think eventually he will fall short while also making Djokovic work for it in the process. So give me that as the outcome, and I'll link to Djokovic team total over in this matchup. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual preview of the Thursday quarterfinal matchups. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. But before into that, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because Rhythm has a bunch of AI picks and props that you're missing out on. And if you paid attention to them for the last week or so, you ended up getting a bunch of winners for golf in the 3M Open. The football models are also about to drop. You can even customize your own betting models easily using Rhythm's tools. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampus.com, rhythmsportscampus.com/RITHMM. We're also brought to you by Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit Survivor and Circuit Millions, giving away $16 million of guaranteed prizes. Imagine the regret you'll feel if you win your office Survivor pool, and then enter the Circuit Survivor. Then we're booked out for Las Vegas for football. Ultimate Contest weekend's a great time to go. Hang out with Ryan and Sean. Enjoy some of the open bar events, the World's Bet Sportsbook, from August 22nd through the 24th. Use promo code SGP15. Save 15% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. Sign up in person at Circuit Sports between now and September 7th. It's a proxy play from anywhere. We even have a deal where you can use proxyfootballcontest.com. And if you do that, you end up saving $50 with the promo code SGP. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the Thursday matches in the Olympics. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, actually, I'm going to go back to that last matchup between Djokovic and Tsitsipas. Give me the Djokovic team total over 12.5 games at -125. This one I did find on Bet Online. For starters, DraftKings has -150. So I do think you're getting a good price on that one. Actually, no, it wasn't Bet Online. It was Bet365. Bet365 has -125. DraftKings has -150. So I'll take the 25 cents on the questions asked. Point is, though, Djokovic has had an easy path up to this point, facing off against basically nobody. Nadal, who was exhausted. Ebden was a joke. And Kempfer in the round of 16. No offense to Kempfer, that's a very favorable draw for anybody to get in the round of 16. Now Tsitsipas is against him, who's been very solid, beating Baez and looking sharp over the last couple of matches. But I do think that Tsitsipas can make it at least one set competitive. He might not win a set, but Djokovic has gone over this number, actually, for the team total in 4 of his last 5 matches against Tsitsipas, with those matches being 2 out of 3 set. Now, they had a couple of Grand Slam meetings where it would have gone over in theory, because the first 2 sets ended up totaling 13 games for Djokovic in the Australian Open final from about a year or 2 ago. Point is, though, in 2 out of 3 set matches, recently, you've seen Tsitsipas hang in there for at least one set, force at least a 7-5 or 7-6. And I do think that can happen once again in this matchup. So I do think Djokovic wins, but I do think that at least one set's competitive. Maybe it goes 3. Point is, though, I think team total-wise, it is a bit cheap for Djokovic at 12.5 at -125. Give me Tsitsipas to hang around to make it at least one set competitive, and as a result for Djokovic to go over his number at 12.5 at -125 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to the matchup between Zverev and Musetti. It's mostly a value play based on price. Give me Musetti money line at +200. He's won 15 of his last 18 matches, so I really have a hard time going against him. Did cash us the dog play for the last episode against Fritz. We know Fritz is a fringe top 10 player. Zverev hasn't really looked that great. Beat Papiron in straight sets, despite falling behind a break in the first set. Papiron's not viewed as being an amazing clay player, so I do think that it is a step up in competition for Zverev. as he ended up having to face off against Papirin and Makic and Munar. So with that being the case, I do think that he might struggle in dealing with Mussetti's current form. Maybe Zverev wins, and we ended up losing this play, but the point is plus 200 does feel a bit disrespectful based on the draw that Zverev's had. Up to this point, he's been a bit vulnerable, having a 7-5 set in the Papirin match and in the Makic match. But I think Musetti, based on current form, has a bit too much value at 2-1. I think he should be closer, in my opinion, to like plus 150. So that being the case, I am going to go with the value in Musetti to keep his good form and to get the job done here at plus 200. Now, that's going to wrap it up, though, for the picks. A reminder of the Lock and Dog picks. Lock's going to be on Djokovic, team total over, 12.5 games at minus 125. Dog will be on Musetti, money line at plus 200. Now, a reminder, we're supposed to do an episode for the quarterfinals in Washington later tonight. We'll see when the matches end. We might have to skip that, though, because with the rain delay, we really might not get lines until very late. So I might not end up doing one. We'll see what happens. But the point is, until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.